All right, we should be all set.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the June 2022 Audit and Finance Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us, and I will now call the meeting to order and ask for adoption of the agenda unless someone has some questions or changes to the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
The next item is the approval of the minutes from May 3rd. Are there any changes or amendments to the minutes? If not, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the IT Oversight Steering Committee quarterly update. Tom, you are somewhere around?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So this is just an informational presentation of the committee that we had in April. So it was basically centered all around security. A lot to talk about. We've had several outside scans and penetration tests and audits. So we've been working hard on those. The good news is that we have all 100% of the critical findings remediated, and we're all but 2 of the high, and the rest are all medium and lows, which are basically desktop focused areas. We found that the majority of our risks were internal, meaning our own systems and computers. A very small percentage were actually outside, where the risks were facing the outside network. We talked about our daily scans that we have from our consultant and our virtual information security officer. They keep finding things and they help us find out how to remediate those. A lot of those are systems of things like Adobe that people have had for years and years that we're finding now have vulnerabilities. So we're reaching out to departments and helping them upgrade those things. And we talked a lot about summer goals, which really is going to be most of my focus is going to be around security, mostly around best business practice of zero trust, and give us time to replace some current products. Also, we're testing today using Esser funds, some of the private LTE down in Edisto. So the tower is up and we've got it running and we're driving around Edisto trying to find out how much area we can cover. We'll continue that into McClellanville probably tomorrow. And then also some security policies starting with my staff, such as 2-factor authentication. So when we log into any of our systems, we'll have to get that code sent to our phone like you do from your bank. And then Mr. Duke had a great idea of actually having our oversight committee do some community projects within our schools. So we're talking about ways to share some of the committee members' expertise going into the schools, maybe talking with either staff and or students, or doing something like going in and working on part of the network so they can see exactly what we do. It was a great meeting. Ms. Green, it was wonderful to have you with us as usual. And that's it. Any questions?
Tom, is there, and I know we don't really want to get into details, but is there a protocol or a procedure or system in place so that should you feel like, or should you have some indications that something is going wrong with our systems, that you have immediate access to whomever you need to do whatever you need to do?
Short answer is yes. Long term, another summer project is a formal incident response plan, which will include HR and it will include communications, so that we know if we do have a major incident, communications will be the one dealing with the public. My path would be through the COO and through the cabinet, but for right now, we have an informal process of my staff knows not to speak to anybody about an incident without going through proper channels. But I believe that we have it informally now, but we're going to formalize an incident response plan.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Tom? Well, Tom, thank you as always for keeping us informed on what's going on. Let us know how we can help support you.
Sure.
The next item on the agenda is the 2017-2022 Capital Program Phase 4 Sales Tax Technology Replacement. And I think that is, you continue with that, Tom.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you. So this request is for approval. We're seeking approval to move $1,675,000 from our teacher laptop replacement to the student device replacement. The main reason for this in this time of year is because one whole sector of our Chromebooks that we have are no longer supported by Google. So we can't upgrade the operating system. We can't load new apps. So this was kind of an out of life cycle management process. And we just want to remove some of this money now. The teacher laptops are in pretty good shape. We don't need to really replace any right now at this time of year. So we're not going to be hurting any of the teachers in the process. So this is a $0 variance and just asking for approval.
Are there any questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the reallocation of these funds.
Make a motion to approve the reallocation of the funds.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you, Tom, again. The next on the agenda is Dr. Taylor with the 2022 Laura Brown funding distribution.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we are bringing forward to the Audit and Finance Committee the recommendation from staff to support through the Laura Brown's. It's a special board fund that supports our students and chaperones attendance and participation in national conferences. There are 27 students who, as well as 10 chaperones, who have submitted requests to attend national conferences. There are 6 national conferences that our students want to attend, and the cost is $32,609.12. And so we are asking for the Audit and Finance Committee to approve the use of Laura Brown funds for that purpose. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions on this request?
Not about the request, but what are the Laura Brown funds, just being new to the?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I'm happy to answer that if I'm in order. So Laura Brown is a former Charleston County School District board member who passed away, and in an effort to honor her legacy, the board members for whom she served with created this special fund that the board manages to make certain that our students can participate in national conferences. I understand that it was a part of her work to make sure that our students as ambassadors were always seen in a good light, and she advocated for our students to participate in such conferences. And this fund was named in her honor after she passed away.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any
Are
other
there-
questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
That you fine, you good. Any other questions?
No, ma'am, I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Okay, I have to keep switching back with all of my agendas back and forth. So the next item on the agenda is the 2017-2022 Capital Program Phase 4 Sales Tax Capital Maintenance Budget. Mr. Cramps.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Great, great. Thank you. So, ma'am, as we continue to execute our Phase 4 capital maintenance program, we have 15 projects that have been completed. We have a little bit of excess, a little bit of surplus for those projects. They're completed. And so I propose to reallocate those to 4 current projects in year 6, as shown on the resolution that's attached to the action. That's it.
Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposes? I just heard the one eye, so anyways, okay, moving right along. The next item, Ron, I'm sorry about
Yes,
this,
ma'am.
y'all, but I'm trying to deal with my technology here at home. Let's see here. Mr. Cramps, you've got the settlement fund project budget also.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's right. Back in January, y'all approved allocation of funds from the old academic magnet settlement for a variety of projects. And one of those projects was to recondition the track at Danny Jones. The city has chosen to not put any more work into that track. And so I'm simply proposing to reallocate that $350,000 to a new project, a project I would add to that settlement list, and that is to conduct some work at North Charleston High School in anticipation of Ms. Shaw's project, where we're going to relocate the front office and do some other work, expand the cafeteria, et cetera, in North Charleston High School. So I'm simply supplementing some of that work with some standalone work worth $350,000 to get that work started. So that's it.
Move to approve.
Just before we do that, I did have one question. Was this new project on your list? I know y'all keep an ongoing list of projects that you need to work on, so I'm assuming it was on your list. Is that right?
This project was a minor capital improvement that's on Ms. Shaw's capital building program list. So this wasn't mine, but I'm just trying to supplement with some funding to get that project done.
Okay.
It was an authorized project that we were working on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have a motion. Can I get a second to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next item is the monthly capital projects report. Ms. Costello.
Thank you, Ms. Green, and good afternoon. I'd like to present the April capital projects report. Our revenue collections for the month of March were 4.2 million above our 2% projected revenue. Great month. Our expenditures next are for the 2010-2016 program, $278,000. For the 2017 through 2022 program, 1.6 million in expenditures. For the 2023 through 2028 program, $2.2 million in expenditures. Capital maintenance, 8% funding, had $528,000 in expenditures. And we are wrapping up our fixed cost of ownership 22, and fixed cost of ownership 23 has commenced. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Any questions for Joyce? Well, thank you for that great report, Joyce.
Thank you.
The next, let's see here. The next item is the 135-day enrollment update. Ms. Milne?
Yes, good afternoon. You received the 135-day enrollment update as information. As you can see from the, you only have a comparison to prior year, but we did a comparison back to 2020, and we are recovering on our ADM from the pandemic impact. And we're right in line with where we were for 135-day counts for 2020. The CD program, the early childhood 3 and 4 year olds, continue to recover, and we have initiatives in place to attract more 3 and 4 year olds into the district to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. Are there any questions?
So I don't know if this is a question for you, but this is weighted pupil for funding. Do we have access to the 135-day count of actual students inside the building? Per building?
Head counts?
Yes. This is weighted. This has your emotionally handicapped, your primary kindergarten. I'm looking for the 135-day student count enrollment. Do we have that yet, Mr. Kennedy?
So I don't think we historically have presented that, but Kathy, I'm assuming you can pull that out of Power School. You're right, Ms. Coates, this is weighted. And the reason why we present the weighted amounts, because that's what the state funds us on, but we can get 135-day actual count, head count.
So we don't do anything after the 45-day count in Angela's department.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So I know we do the live in attend account. I know that at that point we have number of students. Do we ever have a final tally of the number of students in our schools per grade per school ever? Do we ever configure that?
I understand the question. I'm trying to think the timing. So we know, as you know, we do the head count enrollment projections in the winter. We do a reconciliation of that in September when kids come on board. And I think that is the last time we actually do a head count when after the 10th, either the 10th or 12th day after school starts. And then the next information is the 45-day count. And again, that's based on the weighted. But I don't think we ever produce another strict head count until it's time to do the projections for the next year, which would have taken place back this past December, January timeframe.
Sure. Well, I don't want y'all to go and create that if that's not somewhere. I mean, that's if we've got the 7-day count for this year, and we'll get the 7-day count in September. So I don't want anybody to go through the work of producing that if that doesn't exist.
Okay. And Kathy, can you confirm, at this point right now whether or not we've reduced that, and if not, we can check with Angela.
I can verify with my team. I know that there is information that we collect through Data Central, but I'm not sure if that's something that we go through and verify at 135. And I would just have to double check to see if we can pull that together.
Okay. Thank you. If you can, and you can just let us know. Don, Mr. Kennedy, is there anything you have any concern over as it pertains to these numbers, student numbers on the report?
Well, as Kathy indicated, we're seeing a recovery from the drop in during the pandemic, and there's a district effort to recapture the early learners that dropped out of the system. We know parents had fear of bringing their kids into our system during the part of the pandemic, and so we're seeing these numbers are showing a recovery, and we have a district effort to encourage our parents to put their younger kids into our system so that we can get them ready for kindergarten.
Okay. Any questions from any of the committee members? Obviously, this is provided for information, but does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, thank you, Ms. Milne. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And the next item on the list is the approval of projects over $250,000. Mr. Wilshire.
Good afternoon, Ms. Green and finance members here. The June list before you is up for approval here. Are there any questions?
Committee members, does anybody, I've gone through the list with my magnifying glass because it's, but has anybody got any questions about anything on the list? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, can I get a second? or not?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you guys very much.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Welcher. I think you have the next item too, is that right? Doing this,
Covering that item, Ms. Green.
pardon?
I'm covering that item, Ms.
The
Green.
disparity study?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welcher.
Thank you.
So regarding the disparity study, just to refresh the committee's memory, we consulted with Miller 3, a company that was targeted to do the disparity study on our procurement practices in the district. Where we are in that study, we're in the final tier of that study. So there's a component for vendor engagement and public engagement, and it's the portion of the disparity study that's based on the qualitative components of the study. So all the raw data, financial data has been collected and summarized. This is now the qualitative portion of the study, where the firm will actually engage vendors. And this will conclude the data gathering portion of the entire study. We are still working with the city of North Charleston and Charleston to acquire business license data. So currently we have a FOIA request and a revised FOIA request out to gather that information. We are on track to conclude the disparity study by August 2022. Any questions, please?
Shauna, when did we start this? I think it was before your time, but when was it started?
It was last year. I don't have the exact date. Wayne, do you have the exact date?
That's right about, it was like April, March of last year.
Okay. So our August 22 is going to keep us on schedule based on what the firm committed to?
So this is an extension. So we missed our initial deadline, which was earlier this calendar year. And so we filed for an extension to complete the work, which will take us to August 2022.
We don't anticipate needing another extension, however. Is that right?
We don't anticipate it, Ms. Green. What's really the outlier is the FOIA request that we have to the cities for the business license data. So if we don't get that particular information, we may conclude the survey and the study without it, because that's the only time unknown regarding the study at this particular time.
Okay. Are there any other questions from any of the other committee members about the disparity study? If not, thank you, Ms. Williams. And the next item is the follow-up on Moody's credit report rating. At the last meeting, when this information was provided to the committee, there were several committee members that asked for some additional information. So that is what we have. And Shauna, are you or Jackie going to go through this information?
Ms. Carlin's going to cover this information.
Okay. Ms. Carlin, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, thank you. So as Ms. Green said, at our last meeting, the committee had asked us to look into how Moody compares Charleston to other districts and the types of metrics that they used. Our financial advisors, PFM group, actually put this together for us. And what they did is they looked at other school districts that have a double A2 rating like us, which, for example, Dorchester County School District does, Horry County, and Lexington County District 1. And there were a few others, but those were the three that they listed. And basically, Moody's looks at several key indicators in their ratings. For double A rated districts to include economy, financial performance, and leverage. The economy makes up 30% of their rating criteria, and they include resident income, population, and enrollment trends by district. The financial performance makes up 30% of their rating criteria, and that includes, they look at available fund balance ratio as well as net cash ratio. The leverage component makes up 30% of their rating criteria. And basically they're looking at the district's ability to invest in capital needs while paying its outstanding debt and its pension obligations. And then the last piece is institutional framework, which makes up 10% of their rating criteria. And they're basically looking at the district's operating revenue from local taxes as well as their state allocation. So it was a lot of data to follow up on, but this concludes the Moody's rating analysis from PFM Group.
Committee members, any questions, follow-up comments? Does this satisfy what you guys were looking for?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. Thanks for obtaining and providing that information, Ms. Carlin. The monthly financial report is the next item on the agenda, and you may continue.
Hi, Ms. Green, I'll cover that item as well. So the monthly financials, where we are right now is we're anticipating to add back about $23.3 million into fund balance due to a series of events for revenue and expenses. For revenue, we are anticipating to actualize $8.2 million additional over the anticipated budget. That's largely due to the increase in real property revenue and a new revenue fund heavy equipment fee. This is a new fund source for the district. So we will now know going forward to anticipate recovering this fund. In addition to the expenditures, as you're aware, the district, we went into a spend freeze essentially, where we froze positions, froze hiring, and we did a reduction on discretionary items as well. And the net activity of all of that activity is what's causing us to projecting to end the year at $23.3 million savings. And just to FYI, this has been factored into next year's budget already. So we have taken into consideration this dollar amount. Any questions, please?
So I have one question, if I may. What is the total expense? Am I correct that I'm reading the total projected expenditures for this year are $612 million? The prior month estimates, where on this report is the total amount we spend or expect to spend by June 30th this year?
It's the third column, $603 million.
603. Thank you.
Good job today.
Somebody's got some stuff going on behind
That is probably me. I'm sorry. My conference room. Yeah, my conference room just ended. Depot prep over. I'm sorry. Hang on. I'll get to it. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, Shauna, you can continue.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
With the fund balance policy recommended changes.
Yes, ma'am. So this change came about after our external auditors reviewed our fund balance policy during our external audit. And what they asked us to include is to describe circumstances in which we would commit fund balance and go over the minimum 150% operating expenditure requirement, in addition to describing requirements for stabilization arrangements to commit fund balance. So what the modification that we made to the policy does, it provides examples on when we would go over that minimum of 150% operating, in addition to that when we would designate to the committed portion of the fund balance. And this will go before the board for review, the commitment portion.
If I can ask a question, if I'm understanding this, the revision, would the revision have any impact on where we are right now with next year's budget?
No, ma'am. Primarily the revision just asks us to detail when we would go above and beyond the 150% operating expenditures, and then when we commit something, just making sure we follow the proper process and going before the board there. So anything that relates to stabilization, so disaster recovery, if we wanted to stabilize, create a salary stabilization commitment, we could. And we would just, those are just examples, and we would bring that information before the board before we commit the actual funds.
So no, we aren't really changing, we're just putting in writing what our practice is. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, and giving examples of when we would move from one particular designation and fund balance to another.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the committee have any questions? If not, I will entertain a motion for approval to send it to the policy committee, the board's policy committee.
Move for approval.
Is that you again, Cindy?
It was.
Did I get a second? I couldn't hear.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Joyce, I'm
Yes.
sorry, can I go back and ask a question about the last item?
Which item is that?
The monthly update.
Sure.
Thank you. Will we get a similar report for the other categories? Food service, EIA, special revenue?
Which number is your question in reference to, Cindy? I'm sorry.
14.
14. 14 is. Okay.
You asked about the monthly financial report.
Right, I'm asking if we'll get one for the other revenue streams that we use, the EIA, special revenue, food service.
Yeah, so
we can see the total expenditures there versus the budget there.
typically what we've done in the past is we developed this report to make sure that we could give assurance to the Audit and Finance Committee where we thought exactly where we're going to end the year, so that we didn't get to the end of the year and find out that we were short. And so we've only done this for the General Operating Fund, although the committee has asked us to take a look at what I call an all funds type report. That's something that Ms. Williams has been working on. That work is not concluded yet, but we can highlight any one particular fund that the committee may have an interest in, and let you know where the amount of the grant and where we are with the expenditures against that grant.
So, and I think just because as we're going into the next items and another tax increase, it would benefit us to know all the monies that were spent in the classrooms and inside the buildings. I'm not necessarily wanting you to lump fixed cost or debt service or capital in there, but the total amount of money we spent educating children, because GOF doesn't include all the teacher salaries or all the building expenses or all the classroom-based expenses. And I'm not asking for monthly, but maybe it would help if we knew what the actual expenditures were for the 21-22 school year to educate the kids.
Yeah,
throwing out the FCO, the others.
Right. So actually, when we reduced the annual financial statements at the end of the fiscal year, actually we don't publish those until the end of the calendar year. But if you take a look at the fiscal year 21 financial statements, you will see all funds there. So our external auditors work with our finance department to get those reports out as a requirement of the financial statements.
Right. I'm just wondering if we could see what we spent in a time frame prior to the next budget being approved.
Yeah.
Could you produce a report like this for EIA and special revenue without a lot of
we could
a lot of time and energy?
So a partial type report like this, we can show the amount of the grant for each major fund. We can show the year-to-date expenditures.
Right.
But what this report does here, it actually, in addition to those two components I talked about, the revenue and the expenditures, actual expenditures, we have a complete analysis that we go through to project where we're going to end the year, and that's column column 2. And so those are projections. So we can do everything that you're asking for except for the projection. However, we are close to the end of the year. Well, actually, a lot of our federal grants don't close out until September. So we would only have 8 or 9 months worth of data at this point. But I think we can provide you some sense of where we are with our major revenue, major grants.
I thank you. And I know that's something a little bit different, but we're going to approve a budget that includes all of those effective to be spent starting July 1. And I think it just would be good if the board and the public had access to what we'd spent the prior year. And I appreciate you going through that.
Yes, but just for clarity, you say prior year, are you talking about the current fiscal year of last fiscal
Current
year?
fiscal year we're in, but right.
Okay.
Right. It'll be prior year on July 1 when the new budget takes effect.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the next item is the Esser reporting application.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Matt Jordan and his team and Ms. Lisa Sisler collaborated to build the district's first Esser reporting tool. And so this came from a larger request from the board to be able to see all Esser funding, what the spend down, different projects and programs that we were expending on for Esser 1, 2, and 3. And so we developed an internal application, a database that produces that information for us. There is a slideshow, but I'll walk through the presentation. Maggie, is it possible for us to pull up the slides?
Yes, in the packet.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. Just give us 1 second, please. The presentation contains actual screenshots of the database for the committee to view. I think it's 1 more page up. Yes. 1 more. Yes, that's the beginning. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So what this web-based application does is it allows for real-time reporting and of Esser 1, 2, and 3. It pulls data from Munis, our financial management system, and it collects the data and rolls it up into the categories, the programs and the projects that are defined by the district and both for state reporting. Next slide, please. So here's a screenshot. It's relatively small, but I'll walk through it. So the top left, you have the option of looking at Esser 1, 2, and 3 together or an aggregate to see the total budget, the total spending to date. Total budget, total spending to date, and by each particular category. Scroll down, please. Okay, no problem. So for this example, the highlighted bar in yellow at the bottom says services. And under learning services, there's different project descriptions. So it shows the school staffing and supports, it shows learning services, different initiatives that the district has taken and implemented and expended upon using the Esser 1, 2, and 3 funding. Next slide, please. This data will show the original budget, the beginning and end date for the project, the expensed amount, encumbered amount, and the remaining available. And we also look at the percent expended and the remaining expense and a remaining percentage to expend on the particular fund and for each particular project. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, and this slide, this shows that for curriculum, it breaks down curriculum under one of the categories, and then it starts to comb through the project's descriptions under curriculum. So it would be the psychological services, curriculum, IDL, etc. And so reading the data across, it gives the beginning and end date for period, as well as the budget expended, any amended amount encumbrances, and the remaining balances. Next slide, please. As each Esser, each item in the database, it has the division and category and a sub-project, and it's identified. It's directly linked to, again, our financial management system. And you're able to add new divisions, categories, and sub-projects through this tool as well. So as we begin to expand in our initiatives, we can also continue to track that information. Okay, and one key caveat for this, just for data quality and assurance, the financial information cannot be edited. It comes directly from our system of record. So as we begin to use the database or multiple people come in to look at the information, or we draw reports off of it, that information is not editable and maintains its integrity. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And all the remainder of the subsequent slides, it just shows how you can manage the different indices in the database, the divisions, the projects, the sub-projects, etc. Next slide, please. And next slide. And so what this is, it's a snapshot of what we call Ssrs Reporting, where it's the data captured in the Esser application itself can be reported on in real time or so what we've done is developed a data repository to allow us to draw reports to see where we were with a particular project, a particular category, a period in time, et cetera. And so this access, again, is restricted to super users to maintain the data integrity. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. So that is the database that we've developed internally in-house to further break out the projects and the programs under Esser 1, 2, and 3 for reporting purposes. And our team can extract data and information at any time from that tool and that database to report on and package for any inquiries. Any questions?
Any questions from any member of the committee? My question is, where will this be housed, and who has access to go in and create a report or put in the data, et cetera, et cetera?
So Matt, do you want to take that question?
Sure. Good afternoon. So this application is developed on our own internal SQL server. So we work closely with Tom Naraki's team to make sure that where we do our development is secure and following all of those security protocols. As far as access goes, access is based on Active Directory permissions. Again, this is to tighten the controls and the security and controls. So to answer your question on who would have access to go run reports based on this data, it would be any of those financial stakeholders who are in an Active Directory budget group. So primarily it's I believe, CFO, superintendent, and some finance directors and officers. As far as who has access to go into the development environment, or where this basically where this application is built and lives, that would be myself or my programming team, about 4 individuals. And we do have security controls such as a code repository and pull push requests. So none of those changes can occur. Nobody can make changes to that application without there being a formalized approval process in place.
Okay, Thank you.
So Ms. Green, also the committee, so this is this database is a tool for two purposes. One is for the district staff, leaders, managers to manage the financial aspects of our Esser projects. So that's an internal management tool. And then the second purpose is for a reporting tool to report out to the school board at a summary level. So a management tool for managing projects and the financial aspects of it, and a tool for reporting to on the results.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any other questions from any member of the committee?
So I have a question. Is there ever going to be a landing place or a repository that matches all the other source reporting? So for example, there are 15 allowable categories of uses, but then this report starts talking about learning services, and that's not an allowable category per the state thing. So is there any place where all of this is going to line up where I can go to more than one place and find the same information? That kind of goes back to the report over 250,000. Some of those things didn't list whether it was Esser 1, 2, or 3. Some did. None of them list what you're buying as much as what you're going to do with it. And so I think that just is creating some confusion. And I don't know if there's a way to solve that, but it creates a transparency and trust issue that this information keeps looking different everywhere you go. And I don't know if that's even feasible.
Absolutely. So regarding the Esser reporting database, the 15 state categories are embedded in there. So that's another way we can summarize the data. So it does tie back. If we were to run reports for under the 15 categories, it would tie back to what we're reporting at the state categorical level.
Right, but could I see that? Because what I'm seeing is a category 30, and there's only 15 categories. So those are subcategories. Well, is there a drop-down link or somewhere on this dashboard that I'd be able to go back to, and this would be tied back to one of those 15?
It would be a report that we would run. So the database is a repository of all the information so that we can slice and dice it to report it out however we see fit. So we can produce a report from this tool, this application, to show the state categorical level with the 15 categories.
And could you break this out to show where the money was spent in terms of, or who the money was spent, or where it was spent by location or spent by vendor?
We don't have that information in yet. It's just the financial information based on the categories and the projects, the programs, but we don't have vendor information at that level of detail in the database as of now.
And if I heard you correctly, and this is my last question, no one can go read this and get that information. What they can do is read this and ask you to produce a report from this information that ties it back to, say, the 15 categories.
That is currently correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your work on this, and I'm sure we'll be looking to see future reports coming as a result of all this work. The next item is the Ssa 3 initiatives. Mr. Hammer?
Yes, good afternoon, Mrs. Green. The purpose of my update is to provide you information on the next round of Esser investments we're planning to get underway. As you recall, our process is to bring to this group the list of activities that are next to be executed to provide information to this board or to this group in advance of a review with the board. So what I'd like to do is to just go over with you our next list of items that are undertaken here in the next few weeks or few days. There's nothing new, if you recall how we've laid out the structure of our plan in our April 25th brief. There may be one line item here that we're pulling out that excuse me, wasn't as detailed in the brief. But this lines up with what you've already seen as the structure of our Essa program. But these are individual activities that we're moving out on. The first one has to do with our pre-K expansion. And the first line item there talks about curriculum, furniture, and transportation over the next couple of years, in addition to some space upgrades for our next round of investments. One of the things that I wanted to do a little better, because there was some concern that the details within the brief that we were providing for information didn't provide as much information on the specifics of the FTEs that we wanted to hire. So we've added some more details so that you can see exactly the number of FTEs and hires that we're planning to make with our next round of investments. So again, under our pre-K expansion, you see the Head Start, certified teachers and teachers assistants, the principal on assignment, the CERDEP project manager, and the child development teachers and teachers assistants over the next couple of years, and the prices and the costs associated with that. Another item that we're investing in is hiring our AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination Program Manager. That's going to be a one FTE for 1 year. At least that's what this budget is just showing. I'd like to move to a couple of items that we briefed at our last audit and finance and give some more details again with the FTEs involved. Under our leadership pipeline program, we have three more hires over the next 2 years. And under our pathways to teaching, again, we reviewed this with you last month at audit and finance. And what I wanted to do was, again, pull out those FTEs that there was a question asked at the last board meeting about exactly what was involved with that investment. So you see those billets there, or those FTEs assigned to that particular line item. Moving on, also under our Pathways to Teach program, are over the next couple of years, bringing on board 40 adjunct teachers under our Men of Charleston Teach program. Again, that's an investment that we want to start on, and you see the number of personnel involved also over the next couple of years. One item, and I alluded to this earlier, that wasn't specified in our April 25th brief when we laid out our entire Essar 3 program, but something that is a urgent need that we wanted to add to our planning and to our program is hiring and bringing on board a nurse liaison for one of our key programs with the Vision to Learn program. I think the most significant portion of what I wanted to make sure you had some information on is we're getting underway the activities within the D20 Pcp program, which the program itself has many activities, including child care programs, including adult learning program, including bringing on board folks for family coaches. And so I want to lay that out as what are going to be our next investments, both with the activities and programs, as well as the personnel involved with that. One thing that I probably should have annotated this a little bit better. If you see on the bottom there, 40 family coaches, I've listed those as full-time equivalents. Those are actually part-time positions that are within the D20 Pcp plan. So not 40 full-time equivalents. Those are part-time positions that are part of that program. And finally, and fairly significantly as well, we're going to begin on all of the non-FTE activities that were in the school-based proposals. You recall that all of the schools use an Esser allocation to develop individual proposals for their school. Last month at Audit and Finance, we briefed you on start investing on hiring the FTEs that were within those programs. Our next level of investment has to do with the non-FTE activities, which have a large range of things, enrichment activities, field trips, equipment, material, curriculum, those things other than FTEs that were in those programs. So pending your questions, that's our update for our next level of investments, Essar 3.
Questions for Mr. Hammer?
So I guess we go back to the sort of the same question we had before. It seems like we're hiring an awful lot of people to not execute actual education in the classroom. And it certainly doesn't seem to be something the board is concerned about enough to manage, but some things just kind of jump out. We've had AVID for years without a program manager. And so now we need to expend money to hire a person to manage a program that's been in existence. It just seems from an outside looking in, a lot of people getting hired to execute programs that then means we hire people to do the programs. I know we have the 47 teacher assistants or the 10 teacher development teachers and certified teachers, but an assistant director of pathway to teaching, and a director of pathways to teaching, and a project specialist for pathways to teaching, and coaches for the CAP program. And I don't know, Joyce, this is more of a question for you, does our board just not have any concern about that? But I don't want to bring this out and talk about it in a board meeting if no one really, has that concern. We were literally hiring someone to be a program director over the D20, and I don't understand exactly why that can't fall under the people already leading the D20 schools. So Joyce, I don't know if that's more of a question for you, but it just goes back to a lot of people getting hired that aren't teaching.
Cindy, I chair the audit and finance. I am not the member of the school board, and I had some of the same questions you had about the number of positions, and I brought that up at the last meeting. And I guess, I would assume it's a question for Mr. Kennedy in terms of.
I think you're probably right. So Mr. Kennedy, I know you're having conversations with board officers, and this is probably not information they haven't had a discussion about. Is this seem to be okay?
So I have not had discussion with board officers on specific FTEs that have been hired in the program, but I can address some of the questions you have here. So, for instance, with the Avid program manager, so you're right. We have for years had Avid throughout the system, and if you were to take a look, we were to take a look at the Avid in our various schools, you would see that there's uneven implementation of Avid. So if you take a look at early college, high school, as an example, the principal over there, Vanessa Denny, and her staff have done an outstanding job of using Avid to support the learning for their students. That's not the case in some of our other schools. So we want to be able to use this position to learn how we can, throughout the system, make better use of Avid. You mentioned the positions with the men of Charleston. We all know that we have a real dearth of the minority teachers in our system, particularly African-American males. And so this program is to go out and to recruit, train, and Mr. Brigman said, Bill's on the line here. There's the first cohort of that. I think it's 17 that kicks off this in the classroom. 17 male teachers of color that start this fall. And so the program director that you mentioned there, the director is responsible for going out, doing the recruiting, developing the program, and there's a tremendous training component of that. And then if you were to take a look at the FTEs that we have elsewhere in the Esser, I don't remember the number off the top of my head right now, but it's well over 100, and maybe Shauna has that. But we have a tremendous amount of classroom-based, school-based FTEs throughout the Esser 2 and Esser 3, and then in the D20, and that is a major collaborative proposal that entails not only the schools but others and other organizations within the community. And so, yes, we do have level leaders, but we have level leaders that have 12, 13, 14, 15 schools that report to them that they manage on a daily basis. And so this is additional work that they probably don't have the bandwidth to do. So I will ask Bill to talk about the component of hiring additional minority staff.
So let me back up and be specific. I never once mentioned the 40 men of Charleston teach. I mentioned the fact that we're hiring 7 personnel to put 17 of those in the classroom. I'm not talking about the program.
So Mrs. Coates, I will let me know if I'm not answering your question. So under Pathways to Teaching, It actually began in Esser 2. It's part of a district-wide initiative to grow our own teachers. And Mr. Kennedy mentioned the Men of Charleston Teach, which we have a goal through funds through Esser 2 and Esser 3 to hire 60 male teachers of color, specifically at the elementary level. But this program is much larger than that. It's managing all of our alternative route, grow our own type programs, to include Teach Charleston, which I know you're familiar with, where we have about 85 candidates right now that are currently in the program, and we're continuing to add. So we have a director that's being funded out of these Esser dollars, with the understanding that this is actually a pilot program. It's something that most districts have not invested in. So it's an initiative that if it's not successful, then we need to come back to the table once these funds are no longer available to us. So all of that, including the Carolina CAP coaches, those coach positions are a requirement as part of our 6 or 7 MOUs with the University of South Carolina for these alt route programs. That also includes some of our Head Start and what we're doing with our classified employees. And there also USC is providing support as well. So that's a much more comprehensive piece of Pillar 2 than just the Men of Charleston Teach, which is a very important component of Pillar 2. I'll also circle back to the leadership pipeline, which is something that Carolyn Belcher and Terry Nichols have been leading. I believe when it says assistant director, those are actually 2 assistant principals who will be in our schools as an intern type program as part of that initiative. And as far as the project specialist, it may be something that's absorbed in here. But I will also tell you that we have, as a cabinet, decided that all positions coming through Esser dollars will be advertised, and make sure that anyone who's hired understands there's a sunset to these funds, and the positions could at that point may not be funded, or we may be looking for other funding sources. I'm a little more reluctant to do that with school-based classroom positions, but we've decided to communicate that across the board. So did I answer all of your questions, or did I?
Yes, I think so. I think I understand the concern. I think that it's some of this stuff is when it kind of gets answered in past tense, like the D20 initiative is huge, and it's all these different schools and it's these community partners. That wasn't something that was outlined for the board. So then when you put in that much money and it shocks the board, then the answer comes back and goes, oh, well, it was a huge project. So again, it's not up for a vote. It's just, I'm just cautiously saying this is an opportunity with a very finite and set and very clearly defined set of funds to be truly transparent. And I think that there are some ways we could do that better. And that I guess that's really all that we need to say, because these are full-time employees that have been approved.
So one way that we're approaching the transparency piece there, at this coming committee of the whole on Monday, the D20 principals will present their proposal and their ideas and their plans to the school board, and we will have a plan to have all principals come through over the next few months to do exactly that. So Monday, this coming Monday, the first group will be the D20 principals on the D20 proposals. And
I think that's excellent. I think it's a much larger problem when you can go to transparency reports and see that you're paying individuals, not companies, but individuals, $10,000 a month for 12, 13, 14 months in a row, and coding it to Esser and coding it to training. And so when they don't come back to a category, it's just kind of disjointed. And then you have a board that says, hey, it's a great idea to do some serious focus on D20. I don't know how agreeing that was a worthy project meant that I understood that you had created a job description for a director, a job description for program coordinators. It just is, again, it's just a little disjointed. I don't know if we can put this back in and start over, but I was on the stage when we talked about D20, and I'm stunned to find out that means 44 employees to execute a program downtown. And maybe I'm not gathering it when I'm listening, but it just seems that it doesn't connect easily sometimes. I'm hoping Monday night when we hear from the principals, then I'm hoping that when I look at your expenditure reports over the coming months, I can look at that and say, oh, that's what so-and-so said we were going to buy with this money. I guess that's what we're looking for, is some sort of way that it makes sense in all of its formats and uses. But I've taken up way too much of your time with this.
Yeah, Don, I have, well, I don't know if this is for Don or for, well, on the D20, are these figures that are here today, the 7.1 and the 1.7, is that all inclusive of everything that will be going to the D20 project? Or is this, I mean?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. This represents what's in the current spending plan. I know that we're still discussing some nuances of some activities that may still be adjusted within their plan, but this represents everything they have proposed to execute in terms of programs and activities.
And so the 44, not total FTEs, I think you said part-time, are those positions actually going into schools, or
That's
are
right.
those all going
Yes, ma'am.
into schools, not
Yes,
part
ma'am.
of?
Yes, I meant to jump in a second ago. Those aren't district management positions. Those are hires that will be assigned to family clusters that are associated with the schools that provide coaching and support and those things that are necessary to move the program forward.
And my last question is, can you provide, and when I ask for stuff like this, you can provide it for just to me, the other board members may not be interested, but can you provide, for instance, in the D20 initiative, what community organizations they are partnering with and how much they are being paid? Is that possible?
Yes, ma'am. They have, I'm not sure that there have been any partnerships that they have initiated. If I recall within the plan, and I know we have Mrs. Huggins on the line and she can keep me straight on this. I know that within their plan, they have recommended that as part of what they're trying to accomplish, that there are some neighborhood groups and neighborhood organizations that would be useful resources, but I'm not aware of any partnerships that they have underway now. Again, maybe Mrs. Huggins can help me out on that.
Thank you, Mr. Hamer. Thank you, Ms. Green, for that question. As far as I'm aware, Mr. Hamer's understanding of where that proposal is accurate at this time.
So, and I'm sorry to keep asking, because at some point.
Wait a minute, Cindy.
Sorry.
I just want to follow up and make sure I understand. So you're saying that the 7.1 million does or does not include any of the proposals that were solicited under Essa 3 to work with the schools? I'm just trying to get an understanding if included in these dollar amounts, we've already allocated, not necessarily paid them, but allocated funds that will go with a particular organization to help D20 do whatever it is they're doing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. I'll try to take another swing at it. So within that $7.1 million, the proposal has a recommended amount that be set aside for community-based partnerships or matching funds for community-based partnerships. It does not imply that any agreements have been locked in or agreed to. It proposes that there are many community partners that can support these activities, programs, and that a certain amount of their budget be allocated for that. That's what's within that money.
Okay, and I think for me, all I'm getting at is, and I'm using D20 because it's in front of me, but at the end of the day, whenever we have finished with the allocation of community organizations, out of curiosity, I would just be interested in seeing how much, not necessarily how much, but the amount of money that was spent to each or given to each organization. That's all I'm after. As a board member, I get all the time questions about, well, y'all working with this group or that group. This is not a judgmental request. It is just for information. So that's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, and we'll be able to do that at the appropriate time when we start having those contracts. Shauna and her team have developed a process to make sure that school principals understand how to enter into arrangements, contractual arrangements through the procurement department for partnerships. And so that's been communicated to the level leaders, and they've been working with their principals to make that happen. And so all that information will be put into our financial system, and then we'll be able to, at the appropriate time, provide that information.
Okay. And Cindy, before I let you go again, the other committee members, I never want you guys to think that we are dominating the questions, because we do get an opportunity to have another discussion about these, usually at the committee of the whole. So if any of the other board members have any questions or comments, I'd like to make sure that you feel you are getting ample time to ask your questions. So I'm going to ask you now, and then Cindy, I won't forget, I'll come back to you. Stephen, any questions?
No, I'm good. I totally agree where Cindy was going. I'm trying to figure out, why we spend more on personnel who never even touch the classroom where, the students aren't being affected. So, what she's asking is exactly, the same questions I would ask, and probably most people would look if they ever dig deep enough into the numbers and see where they're going. Especially when you're hiring for a position, what even makes it harder that it's only a temporary position. Once ESR funding goes away, then the position goes away, possibly.
Okay, thank you. Velma?
No, I don't have any questions at this time. I'm just thinking that these funds were allocated for specific purposes. So how the funds can be used has been defined to a certain extent. So I'm thinking that the way that the funds are being planned to be used are aligning with the purposes that they can be used for. So just listening to all the conversation and trying to put some of the pieces together.
Okay, that's fair. Michael?
No questions.
Okay, all right, thank you. Y'all, for me especially, feel free to pull my coattail anytime when y'all feel that. I don't ever forget you there, but sometimes I get caught up into my little world, and so I just want to make sure. And I think for all of us, the idea is we want to be able to sit back as board members, as committee members, and understand what the district has done with the funds, and be able to respond to questions that make sense because as I have said over and over and over, it is just too easy to hire personnel and expect that to be the resolution to issues, which usually is not. And in 2 years, then what? So I think that's my summary to staff, and I'm happy to, as I've said to many of you, to work through this with you just to make sure that we're doing the best we can with spending this money. Cindy, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, and Joyce, thank you for that. And I apologize. one thing I'm not sure that we only have 120 seconds to speak on any particular item in the committee of the whole meeting. And we're set with a timer. So I appreciate you allowing us the time to stumble through kind of questions and figure it out. We don't have this opportunity as board members in any other setting. So I echo what Joyce said. We're not trying to take over the meeting. We really don't have another option to have this type of conversation with these decision makers. But let me ask you guys this, and I'm going to echo what Joyce said, because D20 is in front of us. Does this represent all the money you're going to allow the D20 schools to spend? They don't get to implement their individual Esser plans because they get this, or is the individual Esser plans going to be stacked on top of this? And second to that, if this is the D20 plan and they're going to use this money to purchase a product from a vendor, be it after school services or training services, is that the only money spent with that vendor in D20, or will the district then use their other pot of Esser money, which is the district-wide pot of Esser money, to give that same vendor more money to, to stack on top? And so, Mr. Hamer, when you said this is the totality of what's being spent in D20, is it the totality, or is it the totality of this program? And we still have every school implementing their own Esser plans as well.
Well, we tried. We didn't try. What we did was made sure that the individual schools that had their proposals that overlap with this plan. So I think you described it as this being on top of the individual school proposals. It does not overlap, and it does not duplicate what were different, more specified activities and programs for the individual schools. Again, the individual school plans from the schools that are in this particular plan are going to stay intact, and we'll make sure that there's no overlap between what are in those programs and what is being developed with this program. To your second question, and it's something I've been asked before, of how do you ensure that if you have a school or a group of schools that have a partnership with a community-based organization, how do you ensure there's no duplication where the school district comes on top of that with another partnership with it? I think that working with procurement and working with other folks overseeing these programs, there's enough checks and balances to make sure that that doesn't work and doesn't happen, and we can work through that. So I'm already hypersensitive to making sure that we've got some guardrails up to keep that from happening. Hope that addresses your questions.
I think it does. So what I'm hearing you say is there's a D20 program for $7.1 million that is going to use Esser money to improve educational outcomes in D20. On top of, each school inside D20 is creating other Esser programs and spending other Esser money to also improve student outcomes in D20, as long as those two pots of money aren't being spent on the same thing. Because you said those programs would remain, those school-based budgets would remain intact as long as they didn't duplicate what the D20 program is. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm saying. I think if you look within those individual school proposals, they really address things that are within the walls of the school. More specific to maybe some additional human resource supports within the school, some materials and some equipment in the school. If you look at the D20 program, it really addresses those things that are a bit more wraparound from a community standpoint. And so that's why I try to draw a little bit of a distinction between kind of what those individual school proposals and what this feeder pattern proposal is trying to accomplish. Again, right.
And I think that presents a bigger conversation that probably can't be had today, but we are taking Esser monies and we're spending them on, we're overlaying them on top of wraparound services. And I haven't heard any conversation about whether they duplicate, complement, or contradict Title I funding, which Title I funding funds family navigators. So now we're calling them family coaches, but are we no longer going to use that Title I money to fund people to support support families? Or are we, again, just kind of layering different people doing almost the same thing? And I think that might be something, Mr. Hammer, for us to have a deeper conversation on outside of this format, but it's starting to sound like a lack of coordination between, it sounds like Esser isn't closing the gaps. Esser is just a pot of money dropping on top of schools, even if some of the things Esser is buying is already in the school. But I think the last question I would ask you then is, how many school-based positions are being funded out of Esser 3? Maybe we're losing perspective here.
How many we got? Esser 2 and Esser 3, how many school-based? How many school-based positions? I think that's a report that's going to come to the board on Thursday on that. So that there's been pulled, it's being put into a usable format that we can present. And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I don't know, it's probably maybe a couple hundred. Yeah, a couple of hundred. So, and I will also say, and I will say this, is that, we are layering on dollars, and we cannot today say definitively that there won't be any changes. One of the things that we're doing, we're actually pulling data, analyzing data, trying to figure out what some of our root cause problems are, where we haven't been progress, and then we will adjust based on what we determine, what we discover. So, for instance, there were a number of us, including Ms. Huggins, Anita Huggins, that's on the call, that met with the Secretary of Education for the state of Mississippi yesterday. Over a 7 or 8 year time period, they moved from, in their reading position in the country, 50th in the number of states at the bottom, to now, according to the secretary that we talked with yesterday, to 35th. So they moved in 8 years, and she shared with us a number of strategies that the state used. That's the state, not a school district, but those strategies were rolled out to school districts in the state of Mississippi. And so we're taking that approach, looking at what's worked across the country in various systems, and pulling our own data and having some data analysis so that we can make sure that we can pivot and make sure that we adjust not only Esser dollars, but any other funding source that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And it may be that Cindy, you and Mr. Hammer could maybe sit down if you still have some questions. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't be beneficial to all of the board, but just in terms of thinking about time commitments for the rest of today's meeting, since we have to also talk about the budget. Any other follow-up questions before we leave this particular item? If not, thank you, Mr. Hammer. Thank you, committee, for patience and questions and comments. And the next item is the budget update. Shauna, Ms. Williams, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So what we're bringing before the committee today is we are representing the FY23 budget that was proposed in the first reading to the board on May 23rd. So just to circle back and to make sure that we provide this information for the committee and the board. This is not the final budget. This is not second reading. This is just us revisiting and representing the first reading of the budget to the Audit and Finance Committee. As you know, the budget was, our budgetary assumptions were made without the state's adopted budget being final. This is indicative of us presenting multiple scenarios. And the first scenario we presented was a 9.1 mil increase. And that was based on the House, at the time, the iteration of the House budget. We subsequently brought to the board on May 23rd, a new proposal for 6.3 mil increase. And that was based on the Senate's then version of the budget, which was more favorable to the district. With the proposal for 6.3 million, what we included were all of the incentives for staffing and hiring. For instance, the step cap moving from 26 to 30, 28. in addition to raising the minimum wage employees that we have, or the rate for employees that we have working in our system to $17. In addition to our special education positions that we house in the budget, that's a requirement for us, both a special education requirement and to maintain our compliance status with special education. All of the other requests that we had initially proposed in our scenario 3 were removed, other than the ones I just mentioned. This was to balance the budget with the proposal of the 6.3 mil increase. It leaves our fund balance at 127 million projected for FY23. Now, again, this is just revisiting the board approved budget from May 23rd here now. This does not represent the second reading or the final adopted budget. And just for an update, the state, they're in conference as of today. We still don't have which revenue formula finalized at the board that the state will go with. As of today, the most favorable funding formula is being presented by the House, not the Senate. So we would have to change our budgetary assumptions again. And so that large indicator is still unknown. This is just a summary of that first reading of the budget that we presented with a 6.3 mil increase, the HR request and staffing, HR and salary request, as well as $2,000 for teachers, 2.3% COLA for teachers and non-teachers, and step 28. Are there any questions?
I just want to make sure that the committee, because I know this committee has been very supportive of pay increases to get us kind of to some sort of equity. And so the one thing that the board asked staff to do in the proposal that came to the board on that 28 to 30, the board did ask if staff would see what they could do with trying to get that to 30 without changing the 6.3 mils or the fund balance. So that is something staff is working on, and you know, I know until we can come for sure with information about the budget, and those of you who've been around a long time know how South Carolina works. So we may not have a budget July 1st. I mean, that's happened before as well. So I just want to make sure, because I know that it's been the sentiment of this committee that we would want to do whatever we could do to get those step increases at the point, you know, that we'd like for them to be. So I'm just clarifying that to make sure y'all understand that. And certainly any comments or questions from anybody on the committee. Obviously, this is a process that is very fluid as we are, you know, as we go from day to day right now.
And Ms. Green, just to add an update, staff did look and has been continuing to look to evaluate, and we did find a way to move to step 30. So that will be in our next iteration of the budget.
With the 6.3 and the
Yes,
not
ma'am.
taking any money from, oh, okay.
Well, fund balance. Well,
If it increases, fund balance goes up.
fund balance does go up. It does have an impact to fund balance, but the net impact is a positive.
So we would be taking more money out of a fund balance than was proposed to the board.
We're putting more money back into fund balance, and then we're taking a portion of that to fund it.
So if you recall from the monthly financial report that Shauna presented, that there were additional savings and expenditures in this month's report. And of course, this is based on April, end of April. And so we're very close to the end of the year. So we feel very confident in those numbers. And I think she has a team doing an update right now based on May. So yes, we're able to go back up to 30 and at the same time put additional amounts into the fund balance.
Okay, I'll be anxious to see that. And that's and that's coming to the committee of the whole. But I mean, when Audit and Finance meets again, y'all will go through all those details with them as well. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, just for clarity, the next time the Audit and Finance Committee meets will be after the second reading of the budget. So that'll be in July. So this is the June meeting. So the only thing that's really outstanding right now is, as Sean indicated, is the state budget. So we hope to have that shortly. And so what we anticipate is either the 6.3 mil increase or potentially a slight decrease in the mill, if depending on what the state budget numbers look like, and whether they get that done in June before we vote, second reading of the budget. And if not, then I'm not sure what we do at that point, go into July, I guess, but we'll figure that out.
Okay.
And if I may, I also like to make a statement here, is that I'm getting really concerned about what the economy looks like, and if the nation is headed into a potential recession. The last time we hit a recession was 2008. It was a devastating negative impact to the district. So I've asked a couple of people here, Shauna and Bill, to pull together the meeting so we can start doing some what if type planning so that we can be prepared for a recession if it happens, and so that we don't get caught flat-footed. You know, the Federal Reserve back in the winter, they kept saying that inflation was going to be not a problem, and that didn't pan out. And so, from my perspective, I'm seeing what I hear from the financial reports that come across the news wires is that there are some indications that we may be headed in the recessionary path. So we need to be prepared for that potentiality.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Kennedy. Are there any other questions, comments for Shauna or Mr. Kennedy on the budget or anything else we've talked about today? Because that is our last item before we go into executive session. If not, thank you all that are here and participated in providing information for us. And and we will now go into executive session.
We're all back in open session, Ms. Green. I think you're muted.
Okay, we are back in open session and we had one item to consider in executive session. So District 1 contractual matter, and I will now entertain a motion concerning that particular item.
Well, I thought that was just information.
No, it's it is for action. Yeah, it said on the you were led astray. It did say I think information, but we do need to take action on them. And the request is that we allow staff to negotiate with the potential seller. I think that isn't that right, Angela?
All right, so I'll make a motion to go forward, a staff requested to go forward with contract negotiations on the property.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you so much. The next item is determine board agenda items. Ms. Williams?
Yes, ma'am. The board agenda items, I have item 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 15.
What about 10?
Did I skip 10?
Nine.
No, 9.
9 and 10.
9 and 10. And 10's going. Let's see.
11.
Yes, ma'am. 11.
12.
12.
14.
13,
Oh, no.
13.
14.
13.
No, I think that 13 was just a request from us.
Okay.
Unless y'all feel you want to share it. I'm not suggesting that you don't share it, but I think that had to do with the request from this committee.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll just keep 14, 15. Okay. And
16, 17.
And not 18. We already, that was already approved by the board. So.
Okay.
16 and 17.
17.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Then 19.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
19.
Okay. Again, thank you guys for your patience and your dedication to the work of this committee. I really, really, really appreciate it. And unless someone has a question or comment, the meeting is adjourned and I will see you guys in July. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Shauna. I meant Ms. Williams and Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.